Regulatory changes to be aware of. Legal by Louise Aitken.
As a conveyancer, this year has been one of the most eventful years for change since electronic conveyancing came into place, with many regulations and reporting requirements coming into force or being flagged for change. Here is a guide to some of the changes we have seen recently.
Anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing laws.
New laws have been introduced by the federal government to detect money laundering and the funding of terrorism. These laws now require conveyancers and property lawyers to obtain certain additional information from vendors and purchasers. This includes information such as verification of identity, information relating to the source of wealth relating to the purchase, or whether you or a family member, as a vendor or purchaser, are politically exposed. These changes mean there will be extra requirements and questions asked of you when you are buying and selling. The verification of identity procedure remains unchanged and has been in place for over 10 years. This was introduced to prevent fraud and ensure conveyancers and property lawyers were clearly identifying their clients.
Retirement Village Regulations 2026.
Following the updated regulations coming into place on May 1, 2026, legal firms are now seeing the new retirement village residence and management contracts filter through. The new contracts provide more clarity around the rights of the residents and provide greater rights for the resident to apply for funds from the operator if they are moving into an aged care facility, and changes around renovations when a resident is leaving the village. These changes are seeing greater protections for the resident and have been a welcome update. This does not mean that those contracts should not be reviewed. The contracts can still provide further special conditions and one-off information, which should be reviewed by a property lawyer to ensure each resident is aware of the contents of those documents.
Building Statutory Insurance Scheme Regulations 2026.
As of July 1, 2026, the insurance previously known as domestic building insurance will now be known as the First Resort Home Warranty Scheme. Previously, the insurance applied to all domestic building contracts whereby the works renovations to a property were $16,000 or greater. This amount has now increased to $20,000. You should note that there are implications for works deemed as owner-builder, and you should seek the appropriate advice on this respect. If you are selling or buying, you need to be aware of those changes, and the insurance should be included in a Section 32 vendor statement for structural works completed in the last 7 years, non-structural works completed in the last 2 years. There are also certain other requirements needed to be met, and you should discuss them with your conveyancer or property lawyer.
Proposed changes.
The Consumer Legislation Amendment Bill 2026 has tabled changes to the Section 27 of the Sale of Land Act, which allows a vendor to have access to their deposit following the sale of their property. This would essentially mean that a vendor would no longer have the ability to access their deposit prior to settlement, and furthermore, that a real estate agent could no longer take their commission from a deposit prior to settlement. This would certainly change the process for those looking at buying and selling at the same time, and those selling may potentially need to look elsewhere for the funds required to pay a deposit for their new home, other than relying on the early release of the deposit. There are further changes being flagged with respect to the availability of a Section 32 vendor statement, and those include making the Section 32 vendor statement available at least 14 days prior to auction or a contract of sale being signed. Stay tuned and we will keep you updated as to when those changes may come into force, currently proposed for June 2027.
About Louise. Louise Aitken is Conveyancing Manager at Madison Sloan Lawyers Park Orchards. For more information, go to madisonsloanlawyers.com.au. The content published is of a general nature, and you should consult a professional for bespoke advice regarding your particular circumstances. The views expressed in this column are those of the writer and may not reflect the position of the editorial team.